All right, I think we can still give Donna, Michael, Jennifer, and Marty a hand. They did a good job. So one more time, please. While we're setting up here, I'd like to call the next panel to order and have Kelly, Coogan, Gehr, Jasmine Ruddy as key organizers of the nurse campaign for Medicare for All. They are launching a participation in the distribution of organizing campaign at last year's conference in Minnesota. So a distribution organized for Medicare for All to win, challenging the path forward. So we have a new panel. Are you ready? As soon as this, it will be all yours. So Kelly, all yours, please.
Gosh, what an incredibly unfortunate position we're in to go after that amazing panel and then to go right in between your dinner and perhaps your alcoholic beverage for the evening and to be the last panel of the day. This is quite the challenge, but we are organizers, so hopefully we can handle this. Thank you so much to Mark and Ben and to the Labor Campaign for Single Payer and Healthcare Now for organizing this wonderful conference, for giving NNU the opportunity to speak about its work on Medicare for All. We've had such an incredibly fantastic lineup of speakers. I mean, it's just been an amazing conference. As was just said, my name is Kelly Coogan Gehr. This is my colleague, Jasmine Ruddy. Both of us work at National Nurses United on its Medicare for All campaign. If any of you have had the privilege of being on one of our national calls, when Jasmine gets up here, you'll probably recognize her energized style because she is the person on our team who takes on the huge responsibility of hosting our national calls. So today I'm going to start by talking a little bit about why union nurses have fought so hard for Medicare for All. I will clearly define what big organizing or distributed organizing, phrases you've heard a number of times this weekend, what they are. And then I will explain why the method of big organizing or distributed organizing makes sense in the context of union nurse values. I will then very quickly review the work that we have done on the Medicare for All movement over the past year. Then I'm going to hand it off to Jasmine. She's going to discuss some specific case studies of where and in which organizing contexts distributed organizing has worked really well, where it hasn't worked really well, and how we are working to address those gaps. She will also talk about the next steps for our campaign. If there's time at the end, and I'm not sure there is because things have been a little squished, we want to do an interactive activity on strategic planning for the next steps of the Medicare for All campaign. Jasmine and I both want to very clearly acknowledge from the outset that big organizing is not a panacea. It is not the only answer to the question all of us in this audience live, which is how to build a broad-based grassroots movement for Medicare for All. We experimented with this method of organizing over the past year and come to you in the spirit of wanting to provide a very honest assessment of how and where it has worked, how it hasn't worked, and what we as a collective can do better. We are not at all interested in a battle over who is right, over whose model is better. We are on the ground day in and day out doing the work, and we are interested in building power for our movement and winning. Regardless of where you come from and where you are going with your organizing around Medicare for All, we believe that one thing is for certain. In the face of proto-fascism, there is a necessity for a sea change and a massive paradigm shift in how we organize. This is not a question of either or right or wrong. This is a question of how we creatively pull from multiple organizing paradigms, the tried, tested, and true, and the brand spanking new and at times overwhelming approaches to organizing so that we can win healthcare justice, so that we can throw an enormous wrench into our country's seemingly unfettered march toward privatization by socializing our healthcare system, and so we can restore our democracy in the process. All this is to say is that Jasmine and I are doing this presentation in the spirit of having a real conversation about what it will take to win, because our entire Medicare for All team at NNU genuinely believes that the future of our society depends on it. I want to take just a moment to review why union nurses fight so hard for Medicare for All. Nurses are on the front lines of our country's acute healthcare crisis caused by our egregious multi-payer healthcare systems and the industry and the drivers and the industries in the driver's seat of that system. Insurance, big pharma, and for-profit hospitals, even non-profit hospitals, are forced to mimic the profit imperative to keep their doors open in a world increasingly overtaken by privatization. It is old news to everyone in this room that the insurance industry profits from denying care. But our nurses also directly witness how our entire healthcare system is being rebuilt through accountable care organizations and value-based payment schemes with the sole priority of denying patient care at the center. We call this phenomenon healthcare restructuring, in which the aim of hospitals is to keep patients away and to provide the least amount of care possible to maximize profits. Indeed, the same labor process control measures like Six Sigma, Kaizen, total quality management that took the industrial sector by storm during the latter half of the last century are now being applied in healthcare settings to render treatment of human beings more timely, efficient, and profitable, as if caring for a patient dying of stage 4 metastatic breast cancer and comforting her family fits within the factory floor calculus of an assembly line. Everyone in the labor movement knows that neoliberalism is inhumane to workers. The best way to define neoliberalism is not in terms of what it is, but in terms of what it does. It is meant to tear down any and all barriers to unrestricted profit-making and capital accumulation. The main barriers to that are unions, social programs, regulations, and worker protections, any collective structure that gives working class people the power to shape society in ways that benefit the many and not just the few. But nurses know that in addition to this inhumane treatment of workers, it is not hyperbole to say that neoliberalism actually kills patients. It destroys families. It destroys communities. As licensed providers of health care, nurses' ability to carry out their oath is daily undermined by a system that profits from the denial of health care. This is health care that oftentimes means the difference between life and death for their patients. Nurses exist in a constant tension between their obligation to their licensure, their oath to their patients, and their obligation to their employer. This tension is the reason why National Nurses United is one of the most powerful and militant unions in the country. Built into nurses' unionization Okay, where were we? Nurses exist in a constant tension between their obligation to their licensure, their oath to their patients, and their obligation to their employer. This tension is the reason why National Nurses United is one of the most militant and powerful unions in the country. Built into our unionization is the struggle for the right to comprehensively care for our patients and our communities in their time of needs. This tension between their oath and a for-profit healthcare system is also the reason why they are natural leaders in our Medicare for All movement. Since its inception, our union has consistently challenged labor management partnerships. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the phrase labor management partnership, it assumes that management and workers share common interests and seeks to move an agenda forward that solidifies those common interests. Nurses see our interests as fundamentally aligned with our patients and our communities, and we regardless of whether they are Democrat or Republican, are owned by corporate healthcare interests. In probably a majority of instances, the interests of politicians are more aligned with management and with corporate healthcare than with frontline caregivers and everyday people. Given this, how do we get politicians to listen to us? Should we try and buy them off like the healthcare industry does? Hell no. We are a militant, nurse-led, primarily women-led union, and that is just not how we do things. Our strength doesn't come from the cash of big business or the billionaires. It doesn't come from partnership with corporations. Our strength rests in the trust that everyday people have in nurses. Our strength is in the power of the people, in their potential for unity and solidarity. This is why NNU ascribes to big organizing, so that we can go directly to the people and cultivate their collective power. Everyone in this room knows this, otherwise you wouldn't be here. Corporate power is no match for people power. It is simply a matter of strategically harnessing people power at just the right moment and scaling that big enough to win. One of my favorite picket and strike line chants, I'm going to say it a few times. You don't have to say it with me, but you're going to make me look like a dork if you don't. Ain't no power like the power of the people, because the power of the people don't stop. Say what? Ain't no power like the power of the people, because the power of the people don't stop. Say what? Ain't no power like the power of the people, because the power of the people don't stop. Politicians will eventually be forced to listen. For example, one of the things we do is organize people to call their members of Congress through knocking on doors, crowd canvassing at farmers markets, and texting and calling voters. The size of this effort is really crucial. If politicians receive a dozen calls into their offices, they can ignore those calls. But when they get thousands of calls, which they have, they know that we are serious. And if they don't fall in line behind our vision of a just healthcare system, their jobs are on the line. So the key way for us to show the politicians that public support we have built for Medicare for All is now being translated into real political muscle. Nurses understand that we cannot limit ourselves by asking for the change that politicians think is possible. We must place tremendous pressure on our politicians to make the changes actually needed to began garnering national prominence and unprecedented public support, our Executive Director, Bonnie Castillo, and our National Director of Public and Community Advocacy, Holly Miller, decided to try something bold and different. With some polls showing over 70% of Americans in support of Medicare for all, Bonnie and Holly presciently recognized the barrier to building our movement wasn't so much convincing Americans that healthcare is a human right. A majority are already convinced. Rather, the challenge facing us is reaching and identifying those supporters, meaningfully connecting with them, and providing them with a coherent and consequential path to win Medicare for all. Our task is nothing less than cultivating and harnessing the will of the people behind healthcare as a human right, moving Medicare for all from the realm of the aspirational to the realm of the possible. We are under no illusion that this will be easy. Nobody in this room is. We need to build a movement that is broad enough and deep enough to confront extraordinarily powerful industry groups that are attacking us. We've heard this a number of times today. One of the most recently formed groups, as everyone in this room knows, Partnership for America's Healthcare Future. They alone spent millions on the 2018 midterms. Just last year, corporations spent over $600 million, and this is only what was reported, in campaign contributions lobbying on healthcare issues. CEO salaries for the 6 largest companies, and this does not even include their stocks, average $27 million a year. Of course, in order to maintain the status quo, they will fight us with everything they have. All this is to say is that the scale of the challenge that we face is enormous. Our enemies will fight us so viciously because winning Medicare for all isn't just about radically transforming our healthcare system such that everyone is guaranteed healthcare free at the point of service. Medicare for all fundamentally reshapes and transforms a fifth of our economy. And in one fell swoop, it brings a fifth of our economy back to the people. It challenges the core profit-making priorities of our society and addresses some of the most egregious forms of social and economic inequality. So that is what we're up against, and that is why we need to build a movement big enough to confront and transcend these challenges. We are living the question together here of how we do that. And again, just one more time, I want to be super clear that Jasmine and I are not here to tell you that there's one right answer to how to accomplish this goal. We are simply here to tell you what our experience has been using the distributed or big organizing model. With big organizing, we open source the work. We make it as easy as possible for as many people as possible to get engaged. We don't wait until there is a local organization or a paid staffer in every community. We reach everyone who wants to get involved now through digital tools. We tell them about our strategic plan and tactical tools we believe are necessary to execute it, and then we ask them to get involved in a really specific and impactful way. We place radical trust in thousands of deeply motivated volunteers to get to work leading hundreds of organizing events in their communities across the United States, spanning 6 time zones. Yes, even in Alaska, folks, even in Alaska. With everyone working together on one coordinated strategic plan. With the aid of digital technologies, for those of you who've been involved in this campaign, you know peer-to-peer texting. When you call into our conference calls, we're using Maestro conference calls, Zoom, Slack, mass emails. We take the slow and steady Saul Alinsky style of organizing and one-on-one recruitment and leadership development, but are standing up together first and always is prioritized. Those who are willing to do the work, not necessarily the most outspoken, but those who are willing to do the work, they are the true leaders of the campaign. These are also the volunteers with whom our campaign staffers spend the most time. In just a moment, Jasmine's going to share some stories of these healthcare justice warriors, but for now, I just want to give you a really concrete example. And I'm going to have to get out this PowerPoint and show you someone I think most of you in this room love. Let me just minimize this really quick here. Am I just pulling up the folder? Oh, it's going to be fine. Oh, shoot, but no volume.
This audience has a lot of Democrats in it. It has.
So what we're seeing is Fox News. Some of you might remember that Bernie did a town hall in Pennsylvania back in April. Does anybody remember seeing this clip? Yeah. So probably the biggest core principle of big organizing is, and I keep saying this over and over, but it's so true, and I know that probably everybody in the room agrees with this, that it's not enough at this point in history to rally the usual troops or to preach the choir. We have to bring new people into our movement, people who don't even think of themselves as healthcare activists. We seriously limit the number of people we can mobilize. And so what we're going to see now is the type of people we are looking to mobilize in these hands that are going to be raised in just a second here.
Republicans, independents, Democratic Socialists, Conservatives. I want to ask the audience a question. If you can raise your hand here. A show of hands of how many people get their insurance from private insurance right now. How many get it from private insurance? Okay, now of those, how many are willing to transition to what the senator says, a government-run system?
Plain and simple. Okay. Sorry, let me just get this puppy dog back up here. Yay, technology. Okay. Okay. Previously, and I think a lot of you probably already know this, big organizing has been used with tremendous success in the 2016 presidential campaign, and then it was developed by Momentum in the United Kingdom, which is kind of like analogous to our revolution, to secure Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party victory. Several of our allies were very skeptical this time last year about how well big organizing could work on an issue campaign. To tell you the truth, even some folks on our Medicare for All team at NMU were very skeptical. But we knew that the stars were aligning and that HR 1384 gave us tremendous organizing opportunity and tools to do this. So the questions remain. Does big organizing work for campaigns that do not have concrete electoral deadlines? Does big organizing work to build the long-term, broad-based social justice movement that we will need to win Medicare for All? So we decided to use our Medicare for All campaign this past year as one grand experiment in organizing using this method for an issue campaign. Overall, we believe it works, but not in every way, so Jasmine is going to walk us through a more. And if you don't, I'm really sorry. You can come up and castigate me. I'm used to it. Okay. Yes, this is playing. Perfect. Okay. All right. HR That's the experiment we've been doing. So we're going to talk a little bit about what's been going on over the past year. In mid-November 2018, seizing on the momentum of the Democratic takeover of the House, NMU kicked off our work on Medicare for All with a post-midterms national strategy call with over 5,000 activists from across the United States. On this call, we asked volunteers to take on a role in their community and step up and host a barnstorm, a mass organizing meeting. In February, during our National Medicare for All Week of Action, we held over 150 volunteer-led mass organizing meetings across the United States, all of which were aimed at kickstarting action. And you've heard these statistics twice before, once in Rose's fantastic keynote, and then again this morning with Koki. But I actually want these numbers to sink in, because they're a real BFD. So these barnstorms led to 1,500 canvasses in the subsequent 6 weeks, 20,000 door knocks, and over 10,000 calls, folks, driven into Congress in support of H.R. 1384. And our list of online supporters has grown from nothing to 100,000 in less than a year. Quick tangent, I promise I'm almost done, folks, and I'm going to hand it over to the real star of our campaign, Jasmine, in just a second here. But I just want to take a quick tangent to talk about how canvassing is at the very heart, and I know a lot of people are not big fans of canvassing, but it's at the very heart of grassroots movement building work. For door-to-door canvassing, the type of conversation we have at the door makes a huge difference. At NMU, we use a technique called deep listening canvassing. It's a bit different than what most people think of as canvassing. These days, folks are used to a volunteer knocking on their door, launching straight into a pitch about their candidate, just trying to check a box and move on to the next household. That technique can be really useful in an electoral context, but everyday people aren't genuinely moved politically on issues by those conversations. Most people are trying to figure out how to close the door quickly, and if they're in California, politely. If they're in the East Coast, maybe not so politely. I'm from Baltimore, so I can say that. If the canvasser is lucky. We are trying to change the nature of the exchange at the door. We start by asking the person at the door about their experience with our broken healthcare system. Then we listen. We repeat back what we heard to show them that we were listening. Then we share a bit of our own experience. We connect with people over our broken healthcare system to show them that indeed they are not alone. More often than not, at the doorstep, a light bulb moment occurs. Wow, you've had this crappy experience with our broken healthcare system, and I've had this crappy experience with our broken healthcare system. It's almost like something is broken with the system. It is only at the end of the conversation that we bring up Medicare for All and our bill and finally ask for their support. This is the canvassing technique that we teach to hundreds of canvas hosts on group training calls, in written materials, and on one-on-one phone calls. And we've seen this deep canvassing technique work over and over again in our conversations at the door. And because of this, we believe that it remains the very heart of the unglamorous work of grassroots movement building on Medicare for All. It is the difference between building a grassroots movement and a mass mobilization, which is much more glamorous, but oftentimes just a one-time thing. Now, after our timeline almost done, later in the spring, knowing that we needed to arm volunteers with more diversified tools to win over members of Congress, we gathered volunteers back again on a national call and introduced some additional tactics into the mix, such as legislative visits with their congressional representatives, writing powerful and moving letters to the editor and newspapers everywhere about how a broken healthcare system hurts patients and communities, and how Medicare for All will heal those wounds, and packing hundreds of town halls across the
country in which our activists placed a very direct pressure on congressional representatives to co-sponsor our bill. In June, knowing that the August recess was coming around the corner and that the August recess would be the key moment of the year to put pressure on members of Congress while they are actually home in their districts, we hosted another big national call to plan for our Medicare for All month of action, which many of you participated in, during August and early September. We developed specific pressure campaigns in 54 congressional districts. Folks, that's huge. There's only like 100 folks that haven't gotten on the bill yet, so 54 is huge. Across the country, where representatives still haven't co-sponsored HR 1384. For activists in districts in which representatives have already co-sponsored, we hosted hundreds of texting parties where participants texted voters in key districts, identifying supporters of Medicare for All, so when the time comes for another hearing or a demand to vote on our bill, we already have an army of supporters around the country in place that we can call on who are ready and ready to go. We have identified those supporters and we have that list. So now I'm going to pass it over to Jasmine, as I said before, the true engine of our Medicare for All campaign, to talk about some specific case studies of distributed organizing, and again, also to talk about the challenges we're currently facing, how we're addressing those challenges, and next steps for the campaign. So please welcome Jasmine.